If this is your first time here, I'm Jeff, not Deborah. And if you have been here a long time and you looked in your bulletin, you're like, I'm excited to hear what Deborah McKnight has to say. I'm sorry that it's me instead, but here we are. It's somewhat ironic, I guess, that I think I myself am a optimist. I tend to see things as things will just sort of naturally always work out. And I'm here today talking about grief and loss. And as I was sort of thinking about it, I was thinking about in the 90s, there was a song by the Counting Crows called A Long December. And there's a line in the song, well, like the main line in the song, it's been a long December, and there's reason to believe that maybe this year will be better than the last. And this time of year, December, it's a time when we are sort of barraged by this sort of holiday spirit and glee and joy that can be overbearing. And sometimes that unrelenting kind of glee sort of flies in the face of the fact that there's really no moratorium on sorrow and pain, even though it's December and we have plenty of parties. And that those parties don't acknowledge maybe or give space to acknowledge that this time of year allows us to reflect on what happened and think about what could be from one year to the next. So that Adam Duritz is the songwriter for the group Counting Crows, and he said that the song A Long December was his way of seeing that the glass of eggnog was half full for a change. So it was a song about looking back on your life and seeing that change happens. And for once, for him, looking forward and thinking, things might be better. Maybe next year will be better than this one. So I want to believe that next year will be better than 2023, as this year has been full of a lot of loss and change, personally and for our community collectively. Loss of my dad in January, our dog around March. Loss of marital relationships in my extended family. Collectively, we've had loss of rights to health care, access to health care, reproductive rights, gender-affirming care. A loss of a sense of safety and community here, like in our space, through threats to our community. Loss of access to affordable housing in Omaha through the demolition of buildings to make way for luxury apartments. And it doesn't stop. Currently they're looking to, in the state, to restrict our access to public dollars for high-quality public schools. And this loss can be devastating, and nothing can really prepare us for it. There's a range of conflicting emotions that flood in when we experience loss. Grief, for sure, but also emptiness and anger and confusion, nostalgia, remorse. It's the gravity of this sort of loss that forces you to stop and confront yourself and ask questions that you've never really considered before. Questions like, who am I? How did I get here? What am I supposed to do now? For me, I think this year was the first year that I've thought about myself as an adult with real responsibility, which is strange because I have actual responsibility, but it's a new thing for me. Maybe I might be doing okay. So how do we take time during this year, this time of year, to reflect on what does being better next year look like? And when we experience loss and talk about, I found throughout this year that some people would want to avoid sort of talking about the loss in my family as if they would apologize for bringing it up. And I say no, we need to talk about it. We need to work our way through it. That's how we process change. And so currently here at the Urban Abbey, we are in the middle of this fierce online competition for holiday movies. And yeah, it's the sort of thing that divides. Some churches break up because of the color of carpet. If we are going to break up, it's going to be over this. But yeah, my favorite movie didn't make it didn't advance, so I'm going to use the opportunity with a microphone to talk about it. And it's a wonderful life. All right, hey, that's right, the people's vote. Yeah, just not the right people, and not enough times. Probably blocked their IP address so they couldn't keep voting. Oh, okay. Well, okay, there's several factors in George Bailey's life that made it wonderful. And we have wonderful lives here in our homes, in our community, together. But George Bailey had a wonderful life because he put others first. And there's sort of a overarching quality of life that George Bailey had by continuing to put other people first, to the point of sacrifice. Right? Like his younger brother, when he's 12, is sledding and goes too far into the pond, and George jumps in at his own peril and saves his younger brother, but loses his hearing in the midst of that. So George was sort of always confronted, that decision early on in his life to make that sacrifice stuck with him. He could have left the town of Bedford Falls for adventure and a life of architecture, but instead he stays and takes over his dad's building and loan business. All of his instincts and ambitions would drive him to leave, but instead he stays and is persistent and stands in solidarity with his community. And in some ways, small and large, we are confronted with those decisions every day. We can choose a path that's gratifying and satisfies ourselves, that might bring us immediate happiness. It might meet our felt needs right away. But there's another path that I think requires greater sacrifice and more consideration for the feelings of others and how to bring joy and restoration to other people. That also means some restraint on our own impulses. Jimmy Stewart, when he was reflecting kind of 50 years after the movie, someone asked him in an interview what made It's a Wonderful Life so much of an American phenomenon. And he said, today, after 50 years, I've heard that the film is an American cultural phenomenon. Well, maybe so, but it seems to me that there's nothing phenomenal about the movie itself. It's simply about an ordinary man who discovers that living each day ordinarily and honorably, with a faith in God and selfless concern for others, can make a truly wonderful life. The Christian existential philosopher Soren Kierkegaard said, purity of heart is to will one thing. And he's referencing Jesus in the Beatitudes that said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And I think about that in my dad, that he believed sort of as Nietzsche would sort of talk about for anything great to happen, it requires a long and consistent obedience of pursuing something in the same direction. That always, in the long run, makes a life worth living. And so I think what is sort of in the mix of creating a path in the right direction that's obedient to a bigger vision is working hard. These are things that I think encompass my dad, kind of doing things for yourself, considering maybe an alternative, like outside the box sort of thinking. Just speak plainly and tell things like it is. And we can do more together than we think we could. I think we also sort of rarely notice how lucky we are to really be in the orbit of people and until their presence is no longer present. And we sort of feel that now, in this time of year especially. There's a loss of routine and traditions that maybe used to be there and now it may not be. And we grieve that. But grief is an unexpressed love, right? Grief stays with you, and when you grieve, you start to realize all these different ways that you've experienced that person. You get to experience it again. Grief is integration, integrating those values of what made those people, in this case my dad, and if you integrate those values, they truly live on, and you realize there's parts of you that are like for me, like my dad, actions might remind other people of him. random occurrences caused me to celebrate him. And that opportunity to grieve and celebrate starts, the day he died and like continues on. And we have a lifetime of discovering what it means to be like those people that really inspire us. There's another artist, a band called Gang of Youth that the songwriter David LaPepe said he was singing about the loss of his dad, and to paraphrase something he said that I think is really great, it's like, to the places he's gone I'll consider holy ground, and I'll love the things he loved despite my prior thoughts about, and I'll think of him each day as if to nourish me from the inside out. So as I think about that, like in the early 80s, one of the memories I have of my dad was we'd stay up really late and watch MTV. And like music videos were a thing for those young. Like they were on TV. They had to sit and watch. You didn't just watch them on YouTube. But so late hours of the night, like artists like Prince and U2, Dire Straits, Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen. And my dad was not a fan of Bruce Springsteen, didn't like him. But I think this is where like my sort of love of live music and going to shows and seeing people create probably comes from. And I did see Bruce Springsteen this year, probably much to my dad's chagrin, but I did see him. My dad was always there for us in activities. As a young kid, he would coach our teams. If he wasn't coaching our teams, he would be sort of yelling at coaches about like that we should play more. He's just always involved. Sometimes embarrassingly so, I'd say for me. But then he would make time for our kids, like so I'd see him still like kind of follow that, making time, being present, taking time off work to watch our kids like in their productions at school, and throughout all that, I think that long obedience in the same direction meant that he maybe wasn't flashy, and we can sort of incorporate that here too. To always talk about like these others at work that maybe would buy things that maybe they probably couldn't afford, so they would have the appearance of doing well, but that the quiet restraint was really a path forward that's more sustainable. And so I was thinking about that, like in my earliest days in the 80s, at the time of the 80s were about excess, right? Like that I was sort of learning as I reflect on it to practice restraint and to be persistent in the slow burn towards something better. Another thing, like I remember like my dad would, one time he had a sports car, a Corvette, and it was my high school graduation, and my dad told me that I could take the car out and drive it with my friends, and so there's like real power and responsibility there, and I didn't really know how to use that very well, and I drove it really too fast and almost wrecked it, and it was a scary moment, but I didn't know how to use that power, I guess. And so I started driving a Toyota Prius afterwards. So it's like that's probably my level of power and responsibility is a Prius. So again, like my dad, when I think about this, like his dad, my grandpa died when I was in middle school, and so all of a sudden my family, we would start to take care of my grandma. We would like, even though there's other family there, like we would on the weekends would take her to appointments, fix the house, like things in the house. But what it sort of showed me is that there's like teaching us to serve others and to care for those that aren't able to care for themselves. On January 1 of this year, 2023, I signed up for something called the Winter of Grit, which was this running challenge, and it was to run as many miles as you can in January with the idea that it's cold and you're going to do it alone, but you go for it, right? And so on January 1st, I was running, and on that corner right out there at 11th and Jackson, I twisted my ankle and thought, okay, like I can maybe keep going, and I realized, like, did I break my ankle or not? I'm not sure. So I stopped. I stopped running, and I thought I would just take a few days of rest and then pick it up again. Well, 6 days later, January 7th, my dad died, and I didn't really keep going on that. But in many ways, this year has been a winter of grit for us as a community, and I think we can be thankful that we don't have to do that alone, in the cold alone. We have a community with us, a family to walk alongside of us as we work towards the restoration of communities and ourselves. And we need each other. You're here, exactly as you are, you belong. We need you to contribute and help your unique skills and your perspective to bring about wholeness here. And you can help us in serving the community and standing in solidarity against those who wield their power to hurt the most vulnerable among us. A time of loss and sudden death doesn't always give you a lot of time to reflect right away when it happens, but I think we can still remember to always to hold true to this maxim that for anything great to take place in your life, there does have to be a long obedience in the same direction. And that always results in a life worth living. So we can be pure at heart. Think about what that means for us this time of year, as Jesus said in the Beatitudes. For those who are pure in heart, seek God, and we take comfort during this time, knowing that those who have gone before us get to experience that. So, to go back to that lyric in the song A Long December, what does it take for us to make next year better than the last? For those of us at the Abbey, I think helping bring about a wonderful life to those who we work with looks like the long obedience in that direction of being in solidarity for towards the direction of restoration and liberation of our neighbors and our community and ourselves. May we have the courage.